at Adobe Max. This is a full room. There's a lot of you. Hi, everybody. My name is Tina Roth Eisenberg. Most people know me as Swiss Miss, which is the name of my Twitter handle and my blog. And I'm really happy to be back here, so thank you for coming out right after lunch. Over the last 12 years, I started multiple businesses, and if somebody would ask me to sum up visually what those 12 years felt like, I would show them this. I'm a trained graphic designer. Originally ran a graphic design studio, but now I can be mostly heard talking about acquisition funnels and margins, and I sometimes really wonder, how did I get here? So before I tell you a little bit about my story, I want to get a little bit of a sense of you guys, of who's in the room. So we're going to play a little game. It's called Stand Up If. Make sure you're able to stand up. All right, I'm going to put phrases on the projector, and if they apply to you, I want you to stand up. Stand up if you have felt the imposter syndrome. I am not alone. Thank you all so much. I want to know who had to fly here and who's from outside the US. Stand up if you're from outside the US. Oh my God, so many of you. Shout out some of your countries. Where are you from? Wow. Welcome. Greece. Wonderful. Stand up if you manage a team. Oh, so many of you. It makes sense, right? It's about leadership. Thank you. Hello. Stand up if you run your own company. Oh, there's a lot of you as well. Stand up if you feel appreciated at work. Wow. That just makes my heart explode a little bit. I feel really bad for my team members. Of course, they have to stand up in the first row. Stand up if you think you can be vulnerable at work and not be judged for it. Wow. Brene Brown would be so happy. Stand up if you have made lifelong friends at work. That's what it's all about, people. Stand up if you know how to do the floss dance. Gentlemen, show me. You were just like all excited. Show me. Stand up if you're sitting next to someone. This can also be behind or in front of you that you don't know. Say hi to that person. Introduce yourself. All right. So that's cool. I get a bit of a sense of who you all are. Thank you for participating. So back to my imposter syndrome slide. I feel like the imposter syndrome has quite a bit of a negative connotation, and I want to challenge that because I, looking back, think whenever I felt like this, it actually meant that I was growing, that I was pushing myself out of my usual comfort zone, and I really dared to try something new. A lot of people always ask me, how do you do it all? You run so many different things, and I usually tell them this quote by Tracy Ellis Ross. I'm learning every day to allow the space between where I want to be and where I am to inspire and not terrify me. But most of all, I must say, I just have a really incredible team that helps me build the things I'm building. But I do remember in 2000, at my first job, my boss sent me to my first ever conference, and I remember walking, actually, by raise of hands, this is the first conference, if this is your first conference for you, raise your hand. There's a lot of you. I remember that feeling. I was walking the halls, and I would sit in these audiences, and I would look at my heroes on stage, and I remember sitting there going, they have it all figured out. But now that I have the honor to be on stage, and looking back I've built a few things, and now I know that they probably had moments where they felt like this. And I really wish my heroes back in the day would have been a bit more forthcoming with their own struggles. And I feel a bit of a responsibility here today to open the curtain a bit wider and also just let you in on, it's not always rainbows and kittens. So I want to tell you a bit about how I got here and why I am here the way I show up today. But just heads up, I might use some terms that might make some of you squirm in your seats a little bit. I will talk about karma and the universe and past lives and energy, and I just ask you for one thing. Don't label it, don't judge it, just sit it out, okay? Just try to have an open mind and open heart, and if it makes you really uncomfortable, I also give you permission just to leave, okay? No judging here. Ready? All right, this is mini me. Version 1.0 Tina Swiss Miss. I, by the way, this was not just a smart branding move to call myself Swiss Miss. I really grew up there. I earned it. I grew up in the northeast of Switzerland in a beautiful area called Appenzell. Green rolling hills and cows. And I was born and raised in Switzerland, and I was raised by two super entrepreneurial parents. And Appenzell, the area I'm from, was the first state that allowed holistic healers to set up shop. So I always say to Americans, I say it's a bit like Arizona of the States. And I grew up with a dad who was interested, that's my dad, that's me, who was interested in past lives. In fact, conversations over past lives over dinner were a normal thing to me. And my dad did past life regressions in our living room pretty much every weekend. And I was like little Tina, 6 or 7 years old, would run up to him afterwards and ask like, hey, what was Aunt Margaret in her past life? So that was very normal to me. It was also normal to me that we would have healers come to our house, we would visit mediums. The words Akashic Records were things I heard all the time. We talked about chakras. I read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross books when I was 12. For those of you that know what that is. And I'm just really, really grateful that I've been raised in such a spiritual and open-minded home with a sense that there's bigger forces at play. But when I was 20, I outgrew my home, literally, because where I'm from is known for that there's a lot of really short people, which clearly I never really fit in there. And I wanted to move to New York, to art school, which is something my parents swiftly shut down and said, if you want to go to art school, go somewhere in Switzerland. So I picked the city the furthest away, which Switzerland is so small, it's kind of hard. So I went to Geneva and then to Munich, and then in 1999, when I graduated and I was old enough just to declare I am going to New York and no longer asking permission, I booked a flight. So I was 2.5 weeks out of fulfilling my dream of moving to New York, even just for 3 months, when I hurt my back really bad, so bad, I had a herniated disc that I couldn't get up for a good week. And I got connected to this back specialist and said, Tina, you need an MRI, we need to see how bad it is. So I went to this place in Munich, and I remember going in there, all I was thinking is like, I want to go to New York, I want to go to New York. And for those of you that know, MRIs are really claustrophobically terrifying. So I was laying on this gurney, and I'm just about to be pushed into this tube, and because it's so loud, they put headphones on you. And the nurse comes up, and again, I'm laying there, I want to go to New York, I want to go to New York, I want to go to New York. And she puts headphones on me, and this song comes on. Guys, you know what was happening? First of all, I was chuckling. She pushed me, and she afterwards asked me, what the heck was that? Nobody ever chuckles. I was like, it's a long story. But guys, it was the universe cheering me on and saying, Tina, we've got your back, pun intended. But they sent me to New York. So this is my first thing to you. Pay attention to when the universe is cheering you on. Pay attention when things are falling into place that are meant to be, and something bigger out there is telling you, don't worry. So in 1999, I avoided back surgery. I was told I can go to New York, and I flew to New York, and I had one job interview lined up in a small design studio, which ended up being more of a psychic reading than anything else, because I remember walking in there, it was so naive and so idealistic, and it was so cute and adorable. I walk in there, and I sit down with this job interview with Matthew Waltman, and within 5 minutes of talking to me, he says, Tina, first of all, you got yourself an internship, congratulations. Secondly, you will never leave New York, and you will marry a tall Jewish man. I sat down and looked like this. I've never had a job before. This was my first full-time job. I've freelanced a lot. And here I was, I just arrived. It was literally 20 hours after arriving. I found myself a job, and I started working. Now in hindsight, running my own studios, this is what Matthew, my first boss, who told me all of these psychic things. I realize now in hindsight just what an incredible influence your first ever job has on you and how you perceive the work life. I was very lucky because Matthew is an incredibly heart-forward human. The only data points I had up at this point were my parents, the lunch conversations, the dinner conversations. You know, as a kid, when you have two entrepreneurial parents, you overhear a lot what's going on, and that was pretty much also the only thing my parents had to talk about is like their employees and the problems and, you know, how to deal with that. And that was a different generation, first of all, but the data points I had were like, you're the boss, you're in power, only your opinion counts. It was quite a harsh reality that I sort of thought what it's like to be a boss or be in a job. But then here I am, and there's Matthew, who's a total mensch. I remember the first day, there was torrential downpour, and even though I left really early, I was stuck in the subway under the East River for an hour and a half, and I was an hour and a half late to work, which kills you as a Swiss. You're just not late. And I walk in there and I'm like so apologetic, and he just looks at me very calmly, hands me a coffee and goes, Tina, it's fine, this is New York, you just breathe. I was like, oh, he's actually nice about this. Or I had my cousin come visit over lunch, and he literally forced me to take a 3-hour lunch because he said family is so much more important than a job. Just, you don't see him often. Just like all these stories of him being just really kind and understanding and generous and open, and he was right, by the way. I married a tall Jewish man. By the way, taking the subway in a wedding gown in New York is great, and nobody cares. New Yorkers are way too cool to even flinch about that. I then also started the two best projects of my life. I gave birth to my daughter Ella and my son Tilo. I started my own design studio when my daughter was born. I started a co-working space called Friendsburg here. It's for creatives. It's a beautiful co-working community. I started a temporary tattoo company, more a joke than anything else, called Tattly. It quite unexpectedly turned into a healthy business. We're shipping tattoos around the world. We create custom tattoos for really cool brands, and we're paying a generous royalty to all the artists that we license the tattoos from. I started a community that I wish existed when I moved to New York, called Creative Mornings. Who here has attended a Creative Morning? Can you shout out what cities? All over. I want to hug you all. It makes me so happy. So for those of you that don't know what Creative Mornings is, it's a monthly breakfast lecture series that happens in 189 cities every month for free in 65 countries, entirely organized by 1,500 volunteers around the world. We get 20,000 people together every month. For those of you that were in the keynote today, those were 14,000. Now you add another 6,000. That's how many people get together every month for free. It's a global labor of love, and it makes me very happy. So, as you can see, I was living the seemingly superhero entrepreneurial life, but I wasn't, because to be honest, I felt more like this lady. But you know, nobody would have never known, because social media is such a lie, guys. It really is. My husband and I were struggling in our marriage, and we couldn't fix it. And we were a really good team as parents. We were just not a really good team as a couple. So I knew for years in my heart of hearts that I had to accept that something's wrong, but I was fighting it. I was fighting the flow of life because I was terrified of the consequences, and I'm sure there's probably some of you in here that can relate to this. I was in real crisis personally, and Bertolt Brecht says is right. Crisis takes place when the old has not died and the new has still not born yet. But very oddly, on October 21st, 2015, I woke up with a sudden clarity. I still don't know what happened that morning, but very unplanned, I asked my husband to go for a walk after we dropped off the kids to school. And we had a very calm, very kind, long conversation. And we decided to separate. And it was such a monumental moment that happened very organically. And I went to work, and I remember sitting in our weekly creative morning staff meeting, sort of starting to take in this decision, what I just did, not really able to pay attention to anything that was going on. And I get a text message from my friend brightest, and it said, "I'm taking my DeLorean for a spin, want to go for a ride?" And I'm like, what? Why is he taking his DeLorean for a spin? Until I realized, guys, October 21st, 2015, it's the date, Back to the Future date. And I started laughing, and there he was. He drove up, the whole team, everyone ran outside. Of all days, this was the day you had to ride a DeLorean. And I started laughing. I was like, there you go again, universe. You guys have a really good sense of humor. The day that I actually decide to listen to my heart and sort of step into my truth, you guys sent me a DeLorean and I can ride back to the future. They have a really good sense of humor. So the most dreaded moment was ahead of me, though, and that was to tell our children. It was probably the biggest knot I ever had in my stomach to sit them down and sort of calmly tell them the change that is about to happen to our family. But oddly enough, that day is now one of my most cherished days with my daughter. About 30 minutes after we told them, my daughter comes up to me and says, "Mommy, can I get purple hair?" I'm like, yes. And I called the hairdresser, we grab our coats, and we walk outside. And on our way to the hairdresser, I look at her and I say, "Ella, you probably know that of all days ever, this is the only day I would say yes to purple hair." She looked at me, she smirked with her 10 years old, and she goes, "I know, Mommy, I know." So we sat in this hairdresser for hours and talked, and we had a very deep and loving conversation about relationships, and that one day she will understand, and that they can get very complicated. And she taught me such a big lesson that day. It is in our power to flip a seemingly bad situation. And I don't want to make light of this. This was hard for her, I get it. But she found a way to see or get something positive out of it. And that made me really think. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do the same. And I thought about it, how can I flip this? And I realized that the divorce story here, the divorce narrative in America is so utterly broken that I said, I am going to flip this. And I started asking my friends and said, does anyone have friends that had an amicable separation? And I started my positive divorce study research. And I met up with a lot of people that had a positive divorce. I took notes. And what has happened is that my ex-husband and I have a really wonderful, healthy co-parenting relationship right now. And at some point, I told my lawyer that if I had to pick an ex-husband, I would pick Gary. And she laughed and said, in the 20 years I've had an agency, like a law firm, I've never heard anyone say that. So, but then the big thing came, and that was to find a new home. The apartment we lived in, I love dearly. You can imagine it was a very thoughtfully designed place, but I knew that was a labor of love that my husband had built. And I was like, all right, let's go. Let's find a new home. And my enthusiasm dwindled quickly after I was turned down to 5 applications I put in. And I realized, oh man, landlords really don't understand what I do. Like, they're mostly conservative older people, and they don't understand why this woman has like 4 companies, and nor did they understand any of the companies, what they did. So I lost a bit steam, and then I went to look at an apartment with my friend, and that was just hideous. I barely made it through it, and I kind of lost it after this. And my friend kind of like, oh my God, she's losing her mind right now. So she got me to a lunch place, and we sat down, and I looked at her, and I said, like, will I ever find a place again that I love? And then I remembered the very first day I started looking for an apartment, I saw this one apartment that took my breath away, but it was too expensive, and I favorited it in Street Easy. And I showed it to her, and my friend looked at it, and was like, oh my God, Tina, that is so you. So we looked at it, and I noticed that it already came down in price, but it still needed to come down another $800. And I said to her, like, I just can't, this is too much money. It needs to come down $800. And she's like, So we eat lunch, I do better, and we're sipping our espresso, and an alert pops up on my phone from Street Easy. The apartment dropped $800 in price. She screams, I scream, she hands me her phone, and I call the broker. And I'm imagining the broker just could put like on their back end, like hit save, and then 30 seconds later she gets a call. And 10 minutes later, we walked into this place that literally took my breath away. I walked in, I had a physical reaction. I started crying, and my friend made sure that the broker didn't think I'm a nut job, and she goes, happy tears, happy tears. I had what I now call a full body yes. It was literally my body telling me, this is it, Tina. And I am now applying this term to everything I do in life. Whenever I have to hire someone, I pay attention to myself. Do I get a full body yes? If I have to, if I purchase something large, just like the big decisions in life, I really start paying attention to, do I feel like that? So when I was signing the lease with my new landlord and landlady, who happened to live in the same building and are just the most wonderful people on earth, as we walked back to the apartment, and this was a big moment for me, she looks at me and says, Tina, I know exactly how you feel right now because I left my husband when my kids were your kids' age, and I'm going to coach you through this first year. So my apartment came with a separation coach, and whenever I would sit on the stoop and have a glass of wine with her, she would sort of give me her advice. So I'm living in this beautiful brownstone apartment in Fort Greene now, and so kind of hit me, it's like, oh man, I don't know anyone here. Who do I call at 3 in the morning? I'm a single mom now. Wait a second, how does that work? And so I get a little squirmy. I was like, oh man, Tina, you don't know anyone around here. And as I'm thinking that, I'm looking outside, and I'm looking across the street, and there's this beautiful brownstone, and I'll sort of peek inside, and I see furniture I like, I see art I like, and I was like, I like what's going on there. They're probably designers, architects, something. And I tell my daughter, it's like, let's see who lives there. A little later, we see the people walk out, and they have kids in my kids' age. So we all screamed, and I look at my daughter and was like, they're going to be our future friends. It was winter, and I was like, how do I make contact? I brought this up a few times at work. I was like, guys, how do I do this? What's appropriate in America? Do I go over with a pie? Do I bring a bottle of wine? How do I make contact? So I didn't do anything, but this term future friends became a thing at work. People would check in and like, what's the status with your future friends? And then spring came around, and I come home, and it was one of the nights I didn't have my kids with me, and I look outside, and they're sitting on the stoop. I've never grabbed a book and a bottle of wine faster. I ran outside and very casually sat on my stoop, opened my book, and then looked up. I was like, oh. And I walked over, and all I kept telling myself is, Tina, don't be too obvious, don't be too obvious. And guess what? We became good friends. We now hang on the stoop all the time, and we actually expanded our stoop hangs with our neighbors next door. And I live my best freaking Sesame life, guys. And this was once again a lesson to me that you can build the communities you want to be part of. You don't have to wait for anyone else to build it. You can ignite them. And you can apply this to work. Start a lunch club, watch a TED Talk or Creative Mornings talk over lunch with your colleagues, start a game night. Whatever makes you happy and brings like-minded souls together, just do it. All right, I got an apartment. Everything looked like it was dandy and off to a great start, and everything seemed to be working, but it didn't. I really underestimated this transition into being on my own again. And what happened is that I would wake up in the middle of the night with panic attacks, and then my businesses were not doing so well, and I was worried about money, and I felt like a real imposter at this point. I really didn't know how to turn the ship around. I'm usually a very optimistic, idealistic, enthusiastic person, and there was none of it left. And I couldn't be the leader I needed to be. And I'm really not proud of this phase of my life. It was not my finest moment, but my team was so kind and so patient and so supportive, and I'm so grateful that they carried me through this time. But most of all, I'm really proud of them. They allowed me the space to show up as my whole self, even if my best self wasn't my best self. And I truly believe that this is what work community should feel like. As leaders, we have to make sure to create safe work communities. It's our job. It's in our job description. And you cannot just run your company only focusing on the bottom line. I experienced firsthand what a safety net it can be when your company lifts you up and carries you through a hard time. And all it takes is just a layer of kindness. Kindness is light. It permeates everything. And it raises the energy and frequency of a workplace, a home, a human interaction. And then you add a little bit of empathy on top, and you get loyalty, unwavering loyalty. In my values-driven, idealistic world, work should light a fire in your soul. Because when you work on something that means something to you, you will feel things. And I want my employees to show up fully human. And there shouldn't be a difference in who you are at home or who you are at work. And work should be both the playground and the school where you become your future best self. And I was working hard into becoming my future best self, and I felt like this. Stubborn Capricorn me, for a year, I was holding on for dear life. I dreaded the nights with the panic attacks, and I just couldn't break out of my thought pattern and my fears and my imposter feeling, and I was just muscling through because that's what I've been taught all my life. And it never occurred to me that I could ask for help. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. And in December of 2016, my dear friend Jocelyn basically hit me over the head the third time and said, just make an appointment with my coach now, please. Just do it. And I did, just because I love her so much and I respect her so much. And I remember walking into the session going, what's this going to be? And I walked into this session with this intuitive coach, business coach. And I basically said, I don't really understand why I'm so stuck. And I kind of said, is it me? Am I causing this? And then he just grinned and he said, okay, Tina, let's look at this. So he looked at my life through an energetic lens, a spiritual lens. He recapped my past lives, how I operate energetically on a soul level. And I just sat there and I was like, oh, spiritual Tina is back. And, the beginning, that was here back again. And I asked him, why are my businesses struggling as much as they are, given that the love I pour into it and the love that my team pours into it? And over the past 2 years working with my coach, I've learned my most important lessons as a business owner and a leader of teams. And one of them, and I've never thought of it this way, is that every company has an energy just like you and every human has. And that energy is filtered first and foremost through the founder, and then through everyone else that is contributing to the company, the team. And everyone contributes the good and the bad. So if you are neglecting an issue at home, it will most likely show up in some way at work. And if I am not rooted as a leader, neither are my businesses. There is no separation between your private, personal life and your work life because it's all one energy. But yet we think of this in two separate terms. And that separation is an illusion, and that was a big epiphany for me. So the more I started working on myself and reconnect with my soul's purpose, the more energy started flowing through me, and my businesses and myself started expanding. Things started falling into place. There was a clear correlation between my spiritual work that I was doing and the expansion of everything else in my life. I was raised spiritually and open-minded, but it never occurred to me that I could look at work and my businesses through the same lens. And I realized this is a next level conversation and it might not resonate with all of you. That's okay. But I want to find the folks that have started integrating spirituality with business. Because in the end of the day, business is an expression of our spirit and our hearts, just like raising children is or nurturing friendships. And the illusion that business is separate and just about money is just an illusion. The manifestors in this world, the creative manifestors in the world, have a real responsibility not to stay in the low vibration game of success. Holding as much money as possible is a low vibration game. We have to tap into the energy of abundance, generosity, and love to create real change. So, over the last 2 years, I've really worked on myself and recognizing and letting go of unhealthy patterns. I did that with the coaching sessions. I did that with a daily meditation practice. I did that with very purposely shedding anything that doesn't fill me up and drains my energy. I did that with Reiki massages, with the help of ayahuasca journeys. All of this helped me to get grounded. And there's of course different approaches to this. This is just what worked for me. You might need to go for a run. Not me. What has happened is I'm calmer, I'm kinder, I'm grounded. Things don't just throw me off my feet. I'm more patient. And eerily, things have started falling into place. And I don't have to force anything. I don't have to control anything. I have learned to trust and follow the energy of ease. I was raised with the understanding that if you don't work really hard and if it's not really a little painful, then it's not worth it or it's not worthy. And I've learned to trust and adapt to the flow of life. When I started to work with my coach and try to work and positively on impacting my companies, he looked at me and said, Tina, I want to warn you, this is going to rock the boat. People will deselect because you're changing sort of like your frequency, the way you show up. I'm like, that's okay. And boy, did they deselect. People left on their own within 1 or 2 weeks of starting my work. And then very interestingly enough, the people that needed to be in my company all showed up at my door and knocked on my door. When you're aligned with when you're in alignment with what you're supposed to be on a soul level, the universe starts working in your favor. And if this at all resonates with any of you, I have 2 books that I want to recommend to you that have changed my life. It's The Untethered Soul and The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. He explains a lot of the things that I've just told you very quickly at length in these concepts. I understand that it takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. Trusting that inner voice is not always easy. And I remember vividly when I started my design studio in 2006 when my daughter was born and I started hiring people. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this because I'm sure you're in positions of making hiring decisions. When I realized I'm now managing people, I ran to the bookstore and I bought all of the leadership books and started reading them because I wanted to become a super pro boss lady. And what I realized reading those books is that they made me really uncomfortable because the things that were really near and dear to me, they seemed seemingly unprofessionals. I had a sinking feeling that having fun at work, being playful, being silly is actually not considered professional. And it took me a long time to understand that there is no right way to run a company. But the moment where I really understood it is when a year ago, I spontaneously booked the workshop that Jason Fried put on, Jason who runs Basecamp. Sorry, I need to drink water. I flew to Chicago to attend his workshop. He puts this workshop on every few months. I can highly recommend it. It's called How We Work. I respect what Jason has built and how he built it and how he thinks about work environments. So I was sitting there and he's talking about his company. And I've been to his office multiple times. It's library quiet. And it kind of starts daunting on me like, wow, he's an introvert. So he's talking about the fact that if you want to go up to someone in his office and interrupt them, that you have to think long and hard about that because that's considered a bother. I just took a sip of coffee and nearly snorted out my nose because I was like, OMG, Jason will go crazy in my companies because we are loud and extroverted and we have the best ideas when we just go up to people and talk. And it hit me that he was running a company that is a dream come true for introverts. He is an introvert. He built an introvert's dream come true tool. And I realized that as a leader, you have to find your own style. There is no right way. I'm, for example, not your typical CEO. Personal Tina is the same as work Tina. I bring my personal values to work. I lead from the heart with a love for people. I work from the gut and often ignore numbers, very to the chagrin of our CFO. Joy and generosity are part of my business strategy. I lead with a whole lot of trust, maybe sometimes too much. I put people over growth. I put purpose over profits. I truly believe that leadership is not the result of reading a book, but it's showing up with your lived experiences, no matter how unusual they might be. And I truly believe that companies have the power to transform society and transform lives. Because when you create an environment where people feel safe and heard and appreciated and welcome, they go home and they're better spouses and better moms and better dads and just better members of society. So I want to give you just a few simple examples of what we do in my companies to create a heart-forward work environment. And I understand that you might be in completely different environments and they might not work, but they might trigger an idea for something that works for you. And again, I said it before, I believe that work should be playful and fun. Work should be both the playground and school for where you become your future best self. And so here's some of the things we do. When you show up at our door, you are greeted with this. It's become one of people's favorite selfie stations. Whenever I walk up to work and I see people looking in the mirror and taking selfies, I'm really happy about that. When you start working for us, there's chances that you will be greeted with a confetti heart on your desk. We love dogs. I am convinced that dogs make work environments better. I mean, no, really, we love dogs. I mean, seriously, we love dogs so much. In fact, Ginger proofreads every email that Kyle, our Creative Mornings COO, writes. We have an office wing. You would not believe how much joy this thing can bring. We take lunch really seriously. I have an absolutely strict zero desk eating rule. Lunch is where beautiful conversations happen. And I always tell people when they start working for me that you don't just take a job. You start working with me, then you enter a new community and you will probably make lifelong friends. One of my favorite things we do is called Cherries and Pits. Every Wednesday when we have our weekly Creative Mornings check-in, we go around the table with what we call Cherries and Pits. And basically what it is like you share something positive that happened this week and something negative. And our newest member, Catherine, who has a background in law, mentioned that in the beginning, she thought that Cherries and Pits had to be sort of semi-professional, work-related, and went along with it. And then she realized after a few weeks that, oh my God, no, this doesn't work. The more personal, the better. And the more human, the better. And it took her a few weeks to drop the wall that she was trained to keep up in her former career as a lawyer. And I'm a big believer that when you get to know people, when you start understanding a bit what's going on in someone's life and what's happening in their life, you're a better team. You work better together. When I was on vacation last summer, my team sent me a selfie during their meeting saying they miss me, which is so simple and so beautiful. We have really fun Slack channels. One is a bit overheard funny stuff people say in the office. And then also we just share really silly photos, stuff that's happening in the office. We have a monthly happy hour with mini talks where people can raise their hand and say, like, I want to talk about, my latest obsession, a project I've been shipping, a personal project, whatever it is. It's so simple. These presentations are super lightweight. We serve wine and cheese, and it's a really nice way for the community to get together. Our COO at Creative Mornings started a Friday wine down, where we just sit on the fire escape in Brooklyn and wave at people that are on the way to the weekend. And then we leveled it up. A few weeks ago, we had a fire escape jazz concert. We have a really cool landlord he basically, when I asked him if we can do this, he just said, if the firemen show up, just run in and deny everything. I was like, yeah, okay. We have had Lego set challenges where we assembled Lego sets together and drank wine. We have game nights, which my kids really, really love. And by the way, if you want to do a game night, I highly recommend the Telestration game. It's the best game ever. We take birthdays really seriously. I don't understand why people don't celebrate companies' birthdays more often with custom piñatas and all. Did I say we love dogs? I hired puppyparty.com. We got 3 puppies for an hour. It was like the best $250 I've ever spent in my professional career. We have a prop box. because sometimes you just need a Viking helmet to respond to certain emails. But these little sprinkles of joy, they also translate into our products. For example, on Creative Mornings, you can sort the cities by rainbow. It has zero functionality, it just looks cute. When you like a video on Creative Mornings, it rains hearts. I highly encourage my team to include GIFs in their out-of-office message. I don't understand why our out-of-office messages are all so boring. Make it something funny. And then, of course, the infamous confetti drawer. I'm a true believer that every business needs a confetti drawer. Makes everything better. So you might write these things off as silly and non-important. I dare to make you think otherwise. I can tell you for a fact that my son and my daughter love coming to my office, and that to me speaks volumes. The other day I walked in and I caught my son teaching our Creative Morning COO, Kyle, who's sitting here and is probably mortified right now. He taught him to floss. And if I've learned one thing as a parent and as a boss, is that modeling is everything. It's what gets noticed and copied. And I think that's a general rule for life. I'm a true believer that good begets good. And it's really easy to be cynical these days. That's just really not getting us anywhere. And I want my kids and my teams to see that I will not let my spirit be broken by the morally void leadership we're facing these days. And we can flip this all into something good. Again, good begets good. That's why I really, really strongly believe that what we are doing with Creative Mornings is so important. Creative Mornings is an engine of generosity and kindness. It's entirely led by volunteers. And it's basically connecting heart-forward humans that want to see a change in the world every single month. It's a safe place for creative minds to meet and level up. And I have realized that limiting these connections to in-person events is just simply not enough. That's why 6 months ago, my team and I launched a project called the Creative Guild. Think of it as the creative Rolodex of creative companies and individuals, a soulful version of LinkedIn, to simplify it, for the creative community. And we have an aggressive product roadmap ahead of us. We're bootstrapping this. We're setting out to build the friendliest corner on the internet, a place where creative, kind humans will find each other, because they need to find each other. As I promised, I opened my curtain a bit wider and a bit more on the personal side than I usually do in my talks. I hope that there were some stories in there that might have resonated with some of you, but I just want to give you the take-alongs from the last hour. I kindly ask you to notice when the universe is cheering you on. Embrace that imposter syndrome. Push yourself out of your comfort zone. Remember that if you're not grounded, your business or your teams won't be either. If you don't deal with problems, they will show up in some other way in your life. Get rid of anything or anyone who saps your energy. Be ruthless about that. Remember that people are lonely. Create the intentional communities you want to exist in the world. Pay attention to that full body yes next time you have to make a really important decision. Find ways to sprinkle joy into everything you do. Find an 8-year-old to teach you the floss dance. If you're in Brooklyn, I can volunteer my son. And take care of that gentle heart of yours. Just be really good to yourself. Thank you.